Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Where the Monsters Are. I'm Louise.
And I'm Sarah.
So this week I'm going to be covering a bit of everything. Serial killers, disappearances and potentially paranormal events depending on what conclusion you come to. I'll also be discussing suicide and mental health, so if you're affected by either of those you might want to listen to one of our other episodes instead. This week's episode is going to be about the Cecil Hotel. There's been lots of things that have happened at this old hotel since it was first built, from murders to suicides to disappearances. I know it's been covered quite a lot lately because of the Elisa Lam case, but I'm fascinated about the history of the hotel itself, so you might find it as interesting as I do. Just before I go any further, if you're enjoying listening to us, please like and subscribe to the podcast. And if you have a few minutes, please give us a review. That said, sit back, relax, and listen to the tale of the Cecil Hotel. So the Cecil Hotel was built in December 1924 in the Beaux-Arts style. It was built by investors William Banks Hanna, Charles L. Dix and Robert H. Shops. Their intention was originally to attract the business travellers and tourists in the downtown LA area. The hotel's designer was an architect named Lloyd Lester Smith, and he also designed the historic City Club building. That opened in 1925 and is known today as the Primrose Design Building. The City Club is a business organisation and it hosts political, social and economic meetings for business executives. The Cecil itself achieved historic cultural monument status in 2017 because it's representative of an early 20th century American-style hotel. Completion cost $1.5 million, which is comparable to $15 million today. When visitors arrived, they would have walked into the opulent marble lobby. They would have seen stained glass windows, potted palms, alabaster statues. If you look at the outside of the hotel, you wouldn't expect the lobby to look like it does, but I'll include some photos on our Instagram so you can see it for yourself if you've never seen it. The hotel itself consisted of 700 rooms. It was considered excellent in its time, with many people choosing to stay there, so it was doing good business at the start. Sadly, that wouldn't last because within 5 years of its opening, the Great Depression happened, which meant people just had less money for things like staying in hotels. What didn't help was that the hotel also lacked some of the amenities that other hotels had, so it wasn't able to remain competitive. For example, compared to other hotels, there weren't any private bathrooms at the Cecil, so people would be more likely to stay at hotels with better facilities.
Yeah, see, for me, that's always a thing. I'd have to have my own bathroom. I have stayed at guest houses before where they've got a shared bathroom, and no.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to share a bathroom with people I don't know. Not at all. In the 1930s, what also didn't help was that an area less than a mile from the Cecil established itself as Skid Row. It covers 50 city blocks and is immediately east of downtown LA. And by the end of the 1930s, as many as 10,000 alcoholics, homeless and others on the outskirts of society were living within a 4-mile radius. So 10,000 people within 4 miles that's quite a lot.
Yeah.
In June 1947, the LAPD ordered what they called a blockade raid on the whole of the Skid Row area, and over 350 people were arrested. The police tried to justify it at the time by saying that at least 50% of all of the crime in LA originated in Skid Row. They said that after the arrest, there'd been no what they termed as strong-armed robberies. So I'm guessing that means no muggings. In the 1950s, the city of LA was trying to rehabilitate the area by demolishing decaying buildings. Gilbert Morris, who was the superintendent of building at the time, he said that the cost of providing social care services to the population of Skid Row was costing the city over $5 million a year. And for comparison, the average for the rest of the city was $110,000 per square mile each year. So it was costing quite a lot to run it. One measure that the city put in place was to make owners of dilapidated old buildings in Skid Row destroy these nuisance buildings at the owner's expense. And by July 1960, the programme was 87% complete. Building codes were also improved in the 1960s, so that it was actually more economical for residential hotel owners in the area to demolish their buildings rather than pay for repairs. So much so that by the 70s, the amount of these buildings in the area had dropped from 15,000 to around 7,500. As a result of this, many residents in the area found themselves homeless, which was due to the loss of the affordable housing provided by those hotels. By the 1950s, the Cecil had itself become a residential hotel, and rather than housing people travelling on business or tourists, it was instead housing transients who stayed there as full-time residents. And in the 1980s, it would house its first serial killer, but I'll give you more info on that a bit later. Former nun Catherine Morris and her husband, whose name was Jeff Dietrich, established the Hippie Kitchen in the 1970s as a way to feed the homeless population of the Skid Row area, and now, over 40 years later, the service is still active in its work feeding residents of Skid Row, but has been renamed to be Hospitality Kitchen. Now, when I googled that, I think it's because there's another company that's called Hippie Kitchen, which is in New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's why they renamed it.
I think that's a really good idea, and there needs to be more people like that because they just get forgotten, don't they? I mean, when I was in LA, I'm going back a long time ago, I noticed then we both were there, weren't we?
Yeah.
I noticed then there was a large population of homeless people on the streets.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, it's such a shame.
Yeah, as you say, it's been a long time since we've been there, so I do wonder if it's any better now, but that's not the impression I'm getting from the research that I carried out. I'm not seeing it any better now.
Every city, London, even Birmingham here,
Yeah.
You have homeless issues. There was, I think it's still going now, I used to help out with a charity that used to feed the homeless in the city centre. We used to do it of a Sunday.
Oh, okay.
So, every city has those issues, but it did seem really noticeable when we were in LA.
I found it quite disturbing what they were saying, that back in, I think I said the 50s, they just rounded up a load of the homeless people and arrested them.
Well, yeah, because that just doesn't solve the problem, does it?
No, not at all.
They can't keep them in prison forever. When they came out, what did they do? Just let them back out onto the streets? So what did that solve? I guess it just looks good in their figures for that month or whatever.
Yeah, probably. I think from what I could see, they were getting a bit of stick off people, and obviously it was costing them money. So, yeah, that's basically why they were doing it, I think. And they saw that as a quick fix. Arrest them, take them off the street, and that's not a problem. But as you say, when they go back out, problem's still there. They've not actually fixed it.
Yeah.
Back to the Cecil. Eventually, the hotel changed into a single-room occupancy business, which is known as an SRO. Long-term residents rented individual rooms and shared bathrooms with neighbouring residents. Cecil was actually bought by new owners and was partly refurbished in 2011. It was rebranded as Stay on Main, and the biggest change was that part of the hotel was actually cut off so tourists wouldn't be staying in the same floors with its permanent residents. They did still share the lift, so it was possible that tourists going up to their rooms would meet in the lift with some of the hotel's transient residents. The bottom two floors of the hotel were for long-term residents. The Stay on Main / Youth Hostel was on floors 4 to 6, and floors 7 or above are the Cecil Hotel rooms. Many of the tourists who had rooms at Stay on Main didn't seem to know that they were actually staying at the Cecil Hotel. I did some research on, I think it was TripAdvisor, and there were some people that just appeared not to know it was the same place at all.
Crazy, because there's a massive sign on it that says Cecil Hotel.
Yeah, but I'm guessing that's on the side, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you look at it from the road on the side, I think Main Street is where it is on this bit, but I think when you turn the corner, that's where the sign is. So they probably never even noticed that because it's up high, isn't it, as well? The hotel was sold again in 2014, so it seems to be changing hands quite a lot. And it was sold to a New York hotelier named Richard Bourne. He bought the hotel for $30 million, after which a development company obtained a 99-year ground lease on the hotel. Matt Barron, who's the president of the development company, he said that he was committed to preserving the architectural and historical components of the building, such as the lobby. but he did plan to redevelop other parts of the hotel that had been changed in recent years, which weren't in line with the original design of the hotel. Apparently, project completion is still due to be done sometime this year in 2021.
It'll be interesting to see what they're going to do with it.
I mean, I've watched things on YouTube and stuff, and I've never seen anybody going around doing renovations or anything from what I can see. So I don't know if it'll actually happen, but at the moment, that's still... Because I'm guessing COVID has had an effect on that as well.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah. I'm now going to go over some of the grisly incidents which have taken place within the Cecil Hotel's walls and have given it its quite macabre reputation. The 1920s saw the first of many deaths that would take place at the Cecil over the years. Having recently split with his wife, Percy Ormond Cook, who was 52, checked into the hotel on the 22nd of January 1927. He'd been trying to get his wife to take him back, but when she refused, he locked himself in his room and shot himself in the head, unfortunately. Over the coming decades, death would occur at the hotel with distressing regularity, but there were also those who didn't die, but the hotel seemed to attract those in pain or distress. In 1929, 33-year-old Dorothy Robertson had been wandering around the hotel following the sudden death of her husband Paul, who was an advertising executive in San Francisco. 3 days after taking a room at the Cecil, she was found in her room having ingested the tablets she'd been prescribed by her doctor for her nerves following her husband's death. Police found a note in her hotel room addressed to a Paul Wall, who was a friend of Dorothy's, who worked as a traffic manager at Standard Airlines. Now, originally, I couldn't actually find anywhere that she was actually staying at the hotel, so I assumed she was just wandering around. I found a really old news article that I hadn't found before, and it actually said that she was actually staying there, and that's how I found the information about the friend Paul Wall. So glad I found that before I actually mentioned it on the podcast. A tenant of the hotel, George Ford, who was known to be a morphine and opium dealer, he was arrested in a police sting at the nearby Astor Hotel and was charged with possession of $10 worth of opium. In the 1930s alone, 6 people died by suicide. The first of these was 46-year-old W.K. Norton, who was a Manhattan Beach resident who'd been missing from his home since the week before he died. Norton was a well-to-do real estate agent based in Providence, Rhode Island. I think that's in New York. It became apparent that his death was self-inflicted when police found poison capsules in his possession. He'd been dead only a few hours when his body was found in his room by a maid, having registered at the Cecil as James Willis of Chicago the day he went missing. Police said that they found several money checks in his clothing made out to Mrs. M.C. Norton. Presumably that's his wife, but I couldn't find that information out. And these were used to identify him. 25-year-old Benjamin Dodich died of an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head in September 1931. Police couldn't find any reason for his suicide, but could only say that he'd checked in on a Saturday and had died a few hours after taking a room at the Cecil. They found papers on his body that said where he'd lived, but nothing else. Similarly to W.K. Norton, a maid, whose name I have this time, Carrie Brown, found his body. The next person to die at the Cecil was Sergeant Louis D. Borden of the Army Medical Corps. Louis was 53 years old when he died in late July of 1934. He killed himself by slitting his throat with a razor. Police found a note by his body saying that he'd been suffering with poor health and this was the reason for his suicide. They also found an additional note asking that his belongings be given to Mrs. Edna Hasener of Edmonds, Washington, and included a post office box address. Sometime in 1933, a young truck driver somehow became trapped between the hotel and his own truck and was crushed to death. Unfortunately, due to poor record keeping at the time, we don't know anything about him. He remains unidentified. On the night of 15th of March, 25-year-old Grace Magro checked into the Cecil and spent the night with a sailor from the USS Virginia. She was found the next morning entangled in telephone wires outside her room on the 9th floor. Some reports say that she died later in the Georgia Street Receiving Hospital, and there was some question as to whether her death was accidental or suicide. The sailor, an M.W. Madison, he was questioned by police and said he had no idea why she would have killed herself. There was no mention of anything relating to foul play, so I'm guessing that was ruled out. In January 1938, Marine Corps fireman Roy Thompson, who was 35, he'd been staying at the Cecil for several weeks when he jumped from the top floor. He was found on a skylight of a neighbouring building by a hotel employee, leading police to think he took what they called a suicide leap. In 1939, Navy officer Erwin C. Neblett was found dead in his hotel room from strychnine poisoning. When police looked among his possessions, they found a letter addressed to a Dr. D.C. Neblett of Staten Island, New York. The police didn't open the letter and instead sent it to a mortuary in Long Beach along with his body, and Irwin was later buried in Tennessee. The 1940s saw 3 more deaths when teacher Dorothy Seeger ingested poison while she was staying at the Cecil. Her condition was reported as being near death in the LA Times, but no further information about what happened after that. She was later reported to have died on the 12th of January 1940. 2 more deaths were reported in the 1940s. In September 1944, Dorothy Jean Purcell, aged 19 at the time, not knowing that she was pregnant, gave birth in a bathroom in the hotel while staying there with her boyfriend, 38-year-old shoe salesman Ben Levine. Not wanting to wake her boyfriend, she walked down the hall to a communal bathroom on the same floor she was staying on and gave birth to a baby boy, and allegedly believing the baby was dead, she threw him out of the window. The baby landed on the roof of an adjacent building and she was charged with murder. The LA Times at the time reported that the surgeon who carried out the autopsy on the baby found that the baby was born alive as his lungs had filled with air. Psychiatrists later testified that she was mentally confused, and in January of 1945 she was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Did she not know she was even pregnant?
No, apparently not. Apparently she didn't know she was pregnant. So she gave birth. Whether it was that she just flipped, I don't know. But it's not known whether she really did think the baby was dead or not. But she said she thought he was dead.
But she'd obviously had some kind of a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
To do something like that.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
They have to take it into consideration, don't they, I guess?
They do, yeah. I mean, I think it was, as they said, it was temporary insanity.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Tragic.
Very. In November 1947, Robert Smith, aged 35, jumped from one of the hotel's 7th floor windows. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information about Robert Smith, so I'm afraid we don't know anything about why he killed himself. Also in 1947, it was reported that Elizabeth Short was seen socialising in the hotel bar. Elizabeth Short, you may know better as the Black Dahlia, a starlet who was murdered a short time later. Her murder has never been found, so we'll likely never know if her appearance at the Cecil is true or whether it's just become something of legend. I'm not going to go through anything else about Elizabeth here because she'll be featuring later in her own episode. 55-year-old Helen Gurney worked at a stationery firm in San Francisco when she checked into the Cecil under the assumed name Margaret Brown. She was given a room on the 7th floor and died on the 22nd of October 1954 when she jumped from the window of her room. It's quite shocking how many people have actually died in this building.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I guess it's a long period of time, but when you break it down even into years, there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm breaking it down by decade, so you can see how many have actually happened in each decade. And it's like, you know, I mean, in one of them, I think there were like 6. That's a lot in 10 years.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they had a lot of people stay there, so
yeah,
I guess it would depend on that ratio. But even so, when you talk about it, the amount of deaths that have occurred there it's strange, isn't it?
It is. It's very odd. Yeah. 1962 saw 3 deaths at the Cecil Hotel. The first was on the 11th of February when Julia Frances Moore jumped from the 8th floor window of her hotel room, landing in a 2nd-storey interior light well. Moore didn't leave a suicide note and found among her possessions were a bus ticket from St. Louis, 59 cents in change, and an Illinois bank book which showed a balance of $1,800. The second death was Pauline Otten. She jumped from the window of her 9th floor window after an argument with her estranged husband Dewey. Sadly, as she fell from the building, she also caused the 3rd death when she fell on passing transient George Giannini, who was aged 65. It was originally assumed that Otten and Giannini had died during some kind of suicide pact, having jumped together. However, this was disproved by the fact that Giannini's hands had been in his pockets at his time of death, and he was still wearing his shoes. Had he jumped, his shoes would likely have fallen off during the fall or upon impact, and his hands would not have been in his pocket.
When you said her husband's name, Dewey, just reminds me of Scream.
Yeah, I mean, and it's actually spelt the same way as well. So yeah, when I was researching it, I was like, Dewey. The final death of the 1960s was the murder of 79-year-old bird lover, hence the name Pigeon Goldie Osgood. This is quite sad. She was killed on the 4th of June 1964. Goldie was well known around the area, having been a permanent resident at the hotel for the previous 6 years. She was one of the permanent residents of the Cecil and spent the day as she usually did, feeding the birds in nearby Pershing Square. She said goodnight to the other permanent residents that she was friendly with for what would be the last time. She went to her room and was found soon after by a man delivering new telephone directories to the hotel rooms. Her room had been ransacked and she had been strangled, raped, stabbed and beaten. Next to her body was the Los Angeles Dodgers cap that she habitually wore and a paper bag full of birdseed. Police thought there was a chance that she'd been murdered by the same person who'd killed another woman in a hotel the month before. But despite arresting a 29-year-old man named Jacques Ellinger, because he'd been seen in the area wearing blood-stained clothes, no evidence pointed to him, so he was cleared, and Goldie's murder remains unsolved to this day.
I think out of all of the stories of people that have died there that I've heard, hers is one of the saddest. And for that to happen to her, I just think it's awful.
I think you're right. I mean, she was harmless.
Yeah.
She was quite happy with her day-to-day, going out feeding the birds, and yeah, very sad. I think there was a lot of anger about that as well.
Imagine, yeah.
Yeah, because they never solved it. Between 1964 and 1974, Skid Row slasher Vaughn Greenwood murdered 11 people outside the hotel. So this didn't happen in the hotel, but it was outside. His MO was to cut his victims' throats from ear to ear and leave cups of blood next to the bodies and create rings of salt around them. Greenwood was convicted of the murders in January 1977 and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He's currently serving his sentence in the California men's colony northwest of San Luis Obispo.
See, I've not even heard of him.
No, neither have I. I might actually research him and perhaps do an episode later.
Yeah, be interesting.
I think so, yeah. So he didn't stay at the hotel, he was just murdering around there. So, yeah. No further deaths were reported until just before Christmas in 1975. Having checked into the hotel under the name Alison Lowell, which turned out to be false, a still unidentified woman aged in her early 20s jumped from her 12th floor window to land on the Cecil's second floor roof. During the 1980s, the serial killer, Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, spent time in residence at the hotel on the top floor for $14 a night, and while he didn't kill anyone while on site, he would return to the hotel for a shower and dump his bloody clothes in the dumpster outside. He terrorised Los Angeles for over a year before he was finally arrested, convicted and sentenced to death. But I'm not going to go into too much detail about Ramirez here because I'm sure we'll be covering him in an episode of his own in the future. Another serial killer also stayed at the Cecil in 1991. Austrian Johann Jack Unterweger stayed there while working as a journalist, supposedly investigating crime in Los Angeles. Unknown to those around him, he killed at least 3 sex workers while he was in the area. He was also a serial killer in his native Austria, having murdered at least 11 prostitutes before moving to the States after he was paroled. He was eventually convicted in Austria of his crimes while in the US and hanged himself shortly after his conviction. He hanged himself with a rope made of shoelaces and cord of the trousers of a tracksuit. It was noted that the same knot that he used was the same as found on the bodies of the strangled sex workers.
So even if they couldn't get him for those crimes before, he basically proved it was him then.
Oh yeah, with the knots, yeah.
I mean, again, I've heard of his name, but I don't really know much about his crimes.
Maybe I can look into him as a future episode as well. Because I mean, I didn't really go into it much here, but I think there's quite a lot of backstory there. I think there's a lot of things that happened when he was in Austria. The thing that sort of pops to me is, how did he get paroled if he killed people in Austria? But I think things happened in Austria. I think there was like a lot of protests and things that went on when that happened. So I think I will cover that. The next reported death didn't occur until 1992 when an unidentified African-American man was found in the alley behind the Cecil. The man's never been identified, and police said he'd either jumped, fallen, or was pushed from the hotel's 15th floor. So we don't actually know if it was accident, murder, suicide. The Cecil Hotel again came to the public's attention when a Canadian tourist, 21-year-old Elisa Lam, disappeared while staying at the hotel. By this time, the hotel had gone through its rebranding exercise and was now known as Stay on Main. Lam's disappearance gained the attention it did primarily because of a CCTV surveillance security video that was released by the police after she went missing. But more about that in a bit. Elisa was on a trip to the States and was away from her home in Canada for the first time. She begged her parents to let her go to the States to get some experience of living on her own. When she arrived in LA, intending her final destination to be Santa Cruz, she took a room in the Cecil Hotel, sharing with 2 other girls who she didn't know. After sharing for 2 days, the girls that she shared with complained that Elisa had been behaving strangely. One of the things specifically mentioned was that she'd apparently been leaving cryptic notes for her roommates while they were out, so she was then moved from her room on the 5th floor to a room of her own.
Perhaps she was trying to do that to get her own room.
I don't think that's where it ended, to be fair. One question that this poses is that if she'd been behaving so strangely, surely the hotel had a responsibility to report it so that she could get help. It was suggested by staff at the hotel that they had many incidents of drug abuse and mental health issues, and they couldn't help everyone. Despite this, you can't help wondering whether her death could have been prevented if someone had intervened earlier. She was reported missing on the 1st of February after failing to check out as she'd previously arranged. Police investigated, and this was where the infamous lift footage was found. In the surveillance video filmed inside a lift in the hotel, Elisa could be seen behaving oddly, pressing multiple buttons on the panel. She peered out, looking both ways and stepping in and out. At times she seemed to be hiding in the corner of the lift as though she was afraid of something in the hall outside. She stepped out, moving her hands as though she was gesturing to someone, but this couldn't be proven. She then disappeared around the corner, and this was the last time she was seen alive. Various theories about what was happening in the video ranged from someone following Elisa, and the behaviour she was exhibiting was that of someone trying to hide and get away from them. Another theory was that there was something paranormal going on, that there was a ghost or entity following her. This theory was fed by the fact that the doors to the lift stayed open for a strangely long time when there was nobody preventing them from closing. The police released information about the missing Elisa, and on 7th of February they held a press conference. The video footage was released to the public on 14th of February. Multiple searches of the hotel took place, with the police checking all cupboards, hotel rooms, and they even looked on the roof, but discounted that as a possible route for her disappearance. Since the door to the roof was locked and only hotel staff had a key, she therefore couldn't have gone up on the roof. A police helicopter even did a flyby over the roof but saw nothing untoward. There was no sign of Elisa, and life at the hotel continued on. Tourists and people with a new interest in the hotel following the strange disappearance flocked to the hotel. Investigations continued by the police, but there was still nothing that pointed to what had actually happened to Elisa. Complaints began to come in from people staying at the hotel about low water pressure in the rooms, and that the water was brown and tasted funny. A maintenance worker was sent up to the roof to check the water tanks to see if something was wrong up there. He reached the tanks and was horrified to discover that one of the tanks was open and the naked body of Elisa Lam was in there. It appeared that she'd been in there since she first disappeared. The police were called, and they found that Elisa was naked inside the water tank and her clothes were on the bottom. A police officer gave an interview saying that the door on the tank was closed, which led to speculation from people engrossed in the case that Elisa had been the victim of foul play. How could she have got herself into the tank without someone else being there to close the tank after she went inside, due to the door being heavy and she wouldn't have been able to reach it from where she was in the water? So that let out the theory that it could have been a suicide or an accident. However, that wasn't to be the case, as it was discovered later that the tank door had actually been open when the maintenance worker came upon the body, and the comment made by the police officer about the door being open was wrong. Toxicological tests were carried out as part of the autopsy, and it was found that despite Elisa being prescribed medications for bipolar disorder, the level of these medications in her bloodstream suggested that she'd stopped taking them prior to her death. Experts reviewing the surveillance videotape of the lift said that it did look like her behaviour was that of someone experiencing a psychotic episode. The autopsy itself was inconclusive, and further tests were required before the coroner's office could determine that Elisa's cause of death had been drowning. Further investigations found that Elisa's death had been most likely been brought about by her stopping taking her bipolar medication. It later transpired that she had had a history of doing this, so this seemed to be what had happened. It was supposed that she had had a psychotic episode in the lift and had gone out to the fire escape at the end of the hall where the lift was, which led to the roof. It was also supposed that she'd made her way up to one of the water tanks and in her delusional condition had either jumped or fallen in and had been unable to get out. The theory was that her clothes would have weighed her down inside, so she'd removed them to try to stay afloat, but would have eventually become too tired and had sadly eventually drowned. Obviously, there are still those who think there was more to this than was reported. Some people believe that there was a conspiracy by either the hotel or the police department, or both, hiding what really happened to Elisa. One of the most bizarre coincidences in the case of Elisa Lam was after Elisa died, a tuberculosis outbreak ran through Los Angeles, particularly among the homeless community of Skid Row. The strange thing about this was that the test for tuberculosis is Lam Elisa, which stands for, and excuse my pronunciation here, lipoarabinomannan, which is Lam, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, which is Elisa.
Well done.
It may be right, it may not be.
You probably pronounce it better than I would have.
Sounds impressive. Immediate theories began to surface that Elisa was in fact a biological weapon of sorts. The fact that she was a student at the University of British Columbia, which has a reputable tuberculosis research centre, made people think that the conspiracy theory was true and that Elisa was herself a biological weapon sent infected with TB to control the homeless population of LA. The people who believed this theory thought that Elisa died because she either knew too much or was going to expose the plan. However, her autopsy reported no signs of tuberculosis when she died. I think that sounds the most stupid theory, to be honest.
Yeah, but, you know, she could have been like in 12 Monkeys, the guy with the little bottles. Remember in that where he goes around the world and he lets these viruses out? She could have been doing that.
Yeah, I don't think it was that, to be fair.
No.
Yeah, I think that is the thing of movies. And that was a good movie.
Yeah.
Another theory relates to the last bookstore, which is one of the last places Elisa was seen. The coincidence with this one is that if you look up the last bookstore's website domain and look at the domain registration data, you'll see a postcode V5G4S2. Apparently, if you enter this postcode into Google Maps, you'll find that rather than the location of the bookstore, you'll find the pinpoints to Elisa's burial plot, Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Canada. I couldn't help myself, so I had a look at the registrant information on ican.org, and it does show this postcode. I then checked this on Google Maps, and it is correct that the postcode goes to this cemetery. I'm just surprised that that's still there now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I myself would probably think it's the bookstore that have done it. Just, you know, to get people going down another rabbit hole.
I think publicity as well, isn't it?
Of course,
you know, for the store itself.
And you've got to think there's recently been that Netflix documentary. So, I mean, yeah, they probably would leave it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think that's definitely done by somebody. Regardless of whether you agree with these theories, it's down to your own interpretation about what you believe actually happened. I've been familiar with the case of Elisa Lam for a long time and have found myself as fascinated with the case as everyone else was. I myself had also been sucked into wondering whether there'd been anything supernatural going on after seeing her behaviour in the lift. I hadn't actually thought that she was murdered by anyone, mainly because at the time I hadn't known anything about the history of the hotel. If I had, I might have gone down that route. But I have to say, since looking into it further, I now believe that it's likely that we're simply looking at the very tragic case of a girl on her own in the world for the first time, away from the authority figures in her life, who had stopped taking her bipolar medications and experienced a psychotic break that sadly led to her death.
Yeah, I'd agree, to be fair.
I think that's the most likely.
Yeah.
Reason. The only thing I can say with any certainty is that Elisa Lam's death was appalling and could arguably have been avoided if someone had intervened when she began exhibiting strange behaviour. Also, might her fate have been different if she'd been travelling with someone rather than on her own? If she'd had a friend with her, maybe?
I mean, yeah, if she already suffered from bipolar. And did you say she was known to stop taking her medication?
Yeah.
I mean, really, obviously she was at an age where she can make her own mind up. But yeah, she probably would have been better off having someone to travel with.
I think so. I mean, that would have been the most ideal way of doing it. I mean, she was only 21 as well, you know. I mean, aside from the whole bipolar thing, it should be safe to be travelling on your own, but as a woman travelling on your own at 21...
Yeah, but a lot of people do, don't
they
they?
do.
I mean, now more so than ever.
Well,
There's
yeah.
a lot of...
Yeah. The last reported death at the Cecil occurred in June 2015 when a 28-year-old man was found outside the hotel. It was supposed that he may have completed suicide by jumping from the hotel, but the LA Coroner's Office said that his cause of death had not been determined. In popular culture, the hotel was the inspiration behind that in American Horror Story Hotel. There are also similarities to the Hotel Hyperion, which was in the WB show Angel, whereby the people who stayed there tended to end their lives by either suicide or murder because of a demonic entity that lived in the hotel. The death of Elisa Lam was eerily similar to, and spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the film, the death of the child in the movie Dark Water. There's no way that it was inspired by the Elisa case, as the US version, released in 2005, was based on a Japanese movie that was released in 2002, both years before the death of Elisa Lam. It's just notable in the fact that Elisa was found in a water tank on the roof of the building, and so was the little girl in the movie. So that's all for the Cecil Hotel. I guess it's only natural that people would look at what's happened at the hotel over the course of its lifetime and wonder whether the amount of horrible events would make people think that there could be some supernatural forces at work, if only to try to explain away the fact that so many people tragically lost their lives in and around the hotel. I don't know how it compares to other hotels of a similar age, but it is interesting just how many suicides, murders and accidents have happened at this hotel over the years. Makes you wonder why so many people have come to this hotel to end their lives. Is it fate or something more sinister? With the hotel being refurbished and due for reopening later this year, you can only wonder at what the future holds for this once great establishment, and you can only hope that the next 100 years are better than the first 100. You got any questions or anything, or any thoughts on the Hotel Cecil, Sarah?
Yeah, you have to hope that maybe it'll turn around now and things will be better, because it is a shame. I mean, from the outside, it's a really ugly building.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen of the foyer, I mean, it is amazing. And it's a shame it's got that stigma attached to it. And hopefully, you know, they can bring it back. Because it is a part of history, like Los Angeles history.
In that area, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think it's, like you say, it's weird how people seem to be drawn to it. I mean, the fact that you said there were 3 serial killers that were known to stay there. I mean, it's bizarre because you'd think, you know, Richard Ramirez leaving his bloody clothes in the bins and things. I mean, you'd just think, well, you know, you'd want to keep a more low profile if you was a serial killer.
Well, I definitely would, yeah.
But then they are known to be quite arrogant and they like people to sort of know it's them, I guess.
Well, I think so, yeah. I mean, they like the publicity, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And Elisa Lam, that's tragic. I mean, I quite like conspiracy theories, like reading about them, but I never really believe that kind of stuff myself.
You don't really buy into them?
Not really. I mean, I thought the footage, it's either she's on some kind of drugs or it's because she suffers from bipolar, some kind of a mental breakdown, which now we know that there were no drugs in her system. To me, I think that would be what it was. I don't believe she was murdered the same as you. But yeah, it is quite creepy, the reference to Dark Water, because we watched that not long ago, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
You know, like there's the woman in it, she's named Dahlia, like the Black Dahlia. And then Cecil, we were saying, oh, it sounds like Cecil.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But that's the thing. I mean, when we watched Dark Water, obviously at that point we knew I was doing this. Mm-hmm. So we know about the water tank. But it wasn't until we were sort of like about halfway through the film that we were like, Dahlia and Cecil? There's a lot of things that are very weird.
And like the fact that the water was coming through the taps the same as they experienced in the hotel. It's interesting. It's such a shame that there's been so much death there.
Yeah.
American Horror Story, I've watched the hotel one and I can sort of see the reference that, and also the reference to H.H. Holmes.
I think it references H.H. Holmes more, but I know that there has actually been mention of the lobby area and the design. I think is more off the Hotel Cecil, I think. But the things that go on in Hotel, I mean, I've not watched all of the series, but I know about the series, so I know kind of what's happened. But I think the actual what happens, I think that's more H.H. Holmes, isn't it?
I'd say so. It's very interesting. There was a few things I didn't quite a lot that I didn't know about.
Excellent. Well, hopefully some of our listeners learned something today as well.
Hopefully.
So, Sarah, do you want to tell us a bit about what your next episode is in store for us?
Yeah, I can do. As normal, it'll be another little paranormal treat for everyone. My next one's based on, well, it's about an author that wrote a book that's become quite a big hit on Netflix. A series was made of it. And she is known as probably one of the pioneers of the ghost, like horror genre of writing as well. So.
Ooh, fascinating. I'll look forward to that one. So thank you to everyone for listening, and you can let us know what you thought about this and our other episodes on our social media. If you're enjoying our stories, you can subscribe and follow us on your favourite podcast platform. So stay safe, spooky kids and super sleuths, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.